What's up, everybody? It's your boy DC, and I'm here with my beautiful wife,
Jen.
and we are the Cruise
Tubers.
Today's video, we are going to review our recent cruise on the NCL Getaway.
We are going to separate our review into three categories: service, eatery, and accommodations, each with 3 to 4 areas that we will review within that category.
The scale is going to be from 1 to 5, with 5 being best. We only give full star here, no half stars or decimal places in this video.
There are a total of 10 different subcategories, so the highest possible score a ship can get is 50.
All right, the first category is service. We have 3 subcategories here: embarkation and disembarkation, staff and service, and entertainment. So we're going to start off with the embarkation and disembarkation. So Jen, what did you score this category?
I scored a 4.
Okay, tell us why.
Well, I thought that getting on the boat was much quicker than usual. I knocked down a point because I don't like waiting for my stuff. I wanted to rest. I was tired. I wanted to be able to lay down somewhere. And I also don't like all the announcements. They're really loud. And when we were disembarking, every time they had to call a color, the cruise director, had to do her spiel and thank you for getting on the Getaway. It would have been nicer if they just were like, okay, brown up,
You're
red
talking about
up.
the end when they were disembarking, okay.
Yeah, but based on what I'm saying, I think maybe I should have rated it lower. Maybe a 3.
So you're giving it a 3.
Yeah.
Okay.
I remembered we were kind of stressed, like with all the steps of the process.
Okay, so you're giving it a 3.
3.
All right. I actually gave this a 2, and let me tell you why. The first thing is, I will say, we embarked from New Orleans. This was my first time porting out of New Orleans. I was not sure if the experience was due to Norwegian or just a port in New Orleans, but it was very chaotic getting in the boat. We started off with 3 lines. There was people in specialty needs were supposed to be going in 1 line, and then the lines, when they flipped around the other side, were like crisscrossing, and so people were going in the wrong line constantly, and there was staff there that was like opening the gates like a red curtain or a red velvet rope or whatever, and then closing it off, and it was just very hectic to get on to the boarding area and eventually on the boat. Once we did get on, obviously we had to do our muster drill. I do like that the muster drill is, just a quick check-in compared to the old style. But it was the whole process, I think, just caused a lot of stress for both of us. And you, on top of it, were hungry because you hadn't eaten any breakfast. And so we were just like overly stimulated to start the cruise. I think it wasn't a great experience. I will say disembarking in New York was easier. It was the fastest I've ever gotten off a ship, which was awesome. However, I didn't like that for us to get like an Uber or Lyft, we had to cross the street and there wasn't really a clear area set up for that. So overall, I gave this category a 2. All right, so let's move on to talking about staff and service. You gave this a 5. Tell us why.
I gave it a 5 because everyone is very, a lot of people are very nice, they're engaging, they're friendly. Because I'm gluten-free, I'm dairy-free, they have essentially work as a team to help me. There's someone who's designated to take my orders ahead of time, and you get to know them. They were really gracious, and anything you need, everyone is just like very I think gracious is the word. You know, they sing and play the guitar when you're coming into the buffet to kind of make it fun to wash your hands, use hand sanitizer, and, you know, going down with some of the issues I had to the front desk, they're very accommodating. I've had them put, you know, foam crate on the bed to make it more comfortable. You know, no matter the time of day, you know, you can get help. And they, if there's a problem, they, you know, you don't feel like an inconvenience to them. Like, they actually, like, have given us a credit, or, you know, sent us a bottle of wine, or, you know, a card or something.
I also gave this a 5. I think for me, everyone, and to your point, really did go out of the way. I mean, we're going to talk about the stateroom a little bit later, but had some issues with the stateroom. We went down to the front desk. They eventually accommodated us a few different ways, which we'll talk about. You know, the staff at all the restaurants was always very sensitive to your dietary restrictions, and making sure that you know, you had, you know, something available for you, and accommodating where you needed to. I think the only time I experienced maybe a little hiccup was the first night in the main dining room. Our service was pretty slow. And then after that, we just moved over to one of the other main dining rooms, Savor, which we, you know, had some people that we kind of knew there, and the service was better. And in fact, we even had that same waiter at Savor later in the cruise, and there was no issues. I think it was just, you know, very busy in the main dining room that night, and so our service happened to be a little bit slow. But other than that, top-notch service. So let's talk about entertainment on the ship. Why don't you start here again?
Well, I guess I'm gonna give it a 4. That's what I was thinking earlier. I think there's a lot of things to do, and I didn't get to do all of them. I liked the band that they had was really amazing. They did a Fleetwood Mac, Rumors cover, but they also did other shows, and they were really, really great. I was really impressed. Both comedians were really funny. They had a really good band who would play every day out on the deck, playing, you know, all different genres, reggae music too. They had a Bob Marley set, which unfortunately I missed. And it was fun to do the different escape room-like activities. I think what was coming to mind was that it would have been nice to have maybe some more. I know they were doing some art stuff inside the atrium, but it would have been cool to maybe have, I don't know, something, I don't know, more interactive maybe outside. That might have been cool. I feel like there was a bit more interactive stuff outside, maybe on a previous cruise. I also really liked the seats in the large venue. I have a real issue with seats. You know, we all don't get 2 armrests ever someplace, but the seats were really comfortable, cushy. I could sit in them for a while. I mean, that was a huge win for me, and there was always usually space to sit down there. The other, I think, thing that would make me give it a 4 is that there were multiple times we wanted to go to some shows and there was standing room only, and it was hard maybe to get to the bar. And then, like, for example, in the smaller comedy venue, the chairs are like really, really tight together, and so if you didn't kind of like ask someone or finagle it yourself, you're like, you know, essentially just like on top of everyone, which I don't like. But for the most part, I enjoyed the performances. I missed the dancers that would come into the main dining room. That was fun. So,
Like burn the floor.
Right.
This ship didn't have burn the floor.
It would have been nice if there was an alternative or something, but
Yeah.
you know.
I gave it a 4 as well. I thought that the entertainment on the ship was top notch. You know, there was the Sid Norman's band was great. The Rock to the 90s, that's a new show that they have on there, was great. The comedy was amazing. We actually didn't get to hear Howl at the Moon Pianos, but I heard great things about that. We did see Magician, and then there was actually another couple shows. So they had like a Broadway cabaret rock edition, and they also had like a diva performance we didn't get to go to either night. But those were all really good. My only complaint, the reason I didn't give it a 5, is because two things really. If you go to the Norwegian's app or their website and you look at entertainment, there's a bunch of things that were listed, but several things that were not. They did not list that there was a magician on the boat. They didn't list the Broadway cabaret show. And they did list Wheel of Fortune, which they did not have. So, what we were expecting didn't exactly match what was actually there on the boat. And so I took off a point for that. I think they need to clean that up a little bit and just make sure that, people know what to expect going onto the ship. All right, we are going to move into the next section of our C review, which is eateries. So this breaks down into 3 subcategories, which are complimentary dining, specialty dining, and bars and beverages. So we'll start off with complimentary dining. That includes the 3 main dining rooms, which is the Manhattan Room, Savor and Taste, the Buffet, the American Diner, and Shanghai Noodle Bar, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. And I did American Diner myself. You didn't do that. We did everything else together. So let's start off with you. What did you rate the complimentary dining?
I gave it a 5 because, number one, in general, I just like when people cook for me, and the ease, you never have to wait really when you go there. Everyone, like I said, was like super nice, with my restrictions and things like that. The food is, excellent. You can get really as much as you want. They have, improved their gluten-free options since the last time. Some of the desserts I got, were much better from the previous time. They even made a birthday cake for me, and it was really delicious. It was a huge birthday cake, gluten-free, dairy-free, but it tasted really good. So, the food had really improved from the previous time. The buffet, the Indian food, the Chinese food, the Asian food was really, really good. And, the only things for me, is there's room to grow on dairy-free options like dairy-free creamer, dairy-free butter. They could have a whole slew of stuff like that. And it also is always an extra step. Dairy-free cheese. It's always an extra step for me to have to ask for almond milk. I have to kind of go in the middle of everyone. They grab it for me, which is great. If I'm in the buffet, if I'm somewhere else, then it's easier. But, sometimes people are a little confused in the back. They're not sure. But for the most part, I didn't starve. So
I don't think anybody starved on the boat. And I didn't, when I was just rattling off all the locations, I did forget Oceans, which is included in the complimentary dining. Mm-hmm. I gave it a 4. Let me start out with the highlights. Savor was great. The main dining menu in general, they list several repeat items that they have every single night. I started off with several of those, and then I started to try some of the featured items, which would rotate as we got later into the cruise. I loved everything at the main dining. The wings at Oceans are probably the best wings I've ever had. I went back at least 4 or 5 times there. It's funny, going into this cruise, you hear videos of people saying the wings at Local or Oceans are great. And previously, this is our 4th cruise with Norwegian. I had never tried the wings. but they were amazing. So great wings. I gave it one of the reasons I gave it a 4 was buffet tended to be a little bit redundant, right? They did have a few, as you went farther towards the back of the ship, they did have a few sections that rotated, like the Indian food, and I think I had a pho bowl one time, which was great. But also, I did try American Diner. I talked to some other, people on YouTube about it, and they sort of gave it a thumbs down. And I'll say this: it was the only place on the ship that had meatloaf as a feature. I love a good meatloaf. This was not a good meatloaf. So it was.
He makes a really good meatloaf.
It was a full point reduction based on that.
For just the
that
meatloaf alone, yeah.
So other than that, it was really good.
Specialty Dining's next.
Yep, Specialty Dining's next, and we went to 4 restaurants. Do you remember which they were?
We went to Teppanyaki, which was my favorite. We went to Ocean's Blue. We went to Moderna. And then we went to a spot that apparently didn't make much in
Cagney's, yeah.
So I gave it a 4. I had some of the best scallops and seafood, possible. Teppanyaki was ridiculous. It really exceeded my expectations considering I've done hibachi a lot and I eat a lot of Japanese. So it was just so good. I've never seen scallops this large before. Also had really amazing scallops at Ocean's Blue for the appetizer. And Cagney's, it's hard to remember at this point. I know that I enjoyed it. I still wasn't like, oh my God, I'm obsessed with my steak, because it was not as tender as I would have liked, and I found all the steak. And some of the main dish at Ocean Blue, I did not like, what did I get? Sea bass, but it was like more of a fillet of sea bass, and it was very dry. Moderna, I really could do without that place the next time. There was definitely some good things. You could have some sushi, and I think I liked I don't know if it was a filet mignon or something. There was one meat I really liked.
You like the filet, and you like the flank steak.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would definitely do teppanyaki twice instead of Moderna.
Yeah, I give Specialty Dining a 5. Cagney's is phenomenal. The only place I've ever had a better steak than Cagney's is Peter Luger's in New York. If you know, you know. I felt like teppanyaki was really good. I ended up getting the steak that night, a steak and shrimp combo, I think it was. My shrimp came out first, and my steak came out almost where I was full at that point. So I didn't finish it. It was okay. It wasn't bad. I think I probably would have done the scallops next time. They looked awesome. And I think probably I'd like, if we go on a cruise again and we do teppanyaki, I like to do that earlier in the cruise because it was a fun experience to get to meet other guests and connect with them. So that was really interesting. Ocean Blue, you kept saying oceans plural, it's ocean singular, blue, was...
Ocean's 11.
Ocean's 11. No, it's not Ocean's 11. George Clooney will not be making an appearance in this video. Insert George Clooney. So the appetizers were amazing. I had 3 amazing appetizers, 3 amazing desserts, or 2. I think I only had 2 desserts, but all 4 looked amazing to me. The main dish, I got the surf and turf. The lobster tail was good. I expected, because there was an upcharge for it, it was basically going to be the same filet mignon that I had just had at Cagney's, and it was not. It was night and day comparison to what I had at Cagney's, which melted in my mouth compared to at Ocean Blue. So skip that upcharge if you are at Ocean Blue. And then the other one that we had was Moderno. It was like the last night of the cruise, and honestly, I think we were just food done. Like, we couldn't eat anymore. And so...
But I also don't get a potato. I don't get,
Yeah,
I just kind of get like
because of the
a
dairy.
salad and.
Right, because of the dairy. They brought a potato to me, but it was
Yeah, I wanted them to. I had
had
gotten like mashed potatoes made for me at the other restaurants. They were okay, but still, I liked it. But
and so that overall, I thought it was great though. Five out of 5. So
we had a lot of good food. That's
yeah.
for sure.
And then finally, in the eateries category, we have bars and beverages. Now, Norwegian just changed their free at sea program to more at sea. More at sea covers more drinks under that umbrella, and then there's this connoisseur collection, which is like top shelf, which is an extra charge. To us, I don't think it made a difference, right? The stuff we get, we just, we'll just order a drink. We don't really call out the alcohol for anything specific.
No, we get a lot of Moscow mules. You get mojitos.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. I think the bars are good. What I didn't like about the beverages were that anytime you sat down to eat and you were served, the beverages took forever. So I was never getting a beverage with my appetizer, pretty much.
Yeah.
At
Even
any
like
of the meals.
Coke.
Yeah, just like a soda. So that was really. I found that to be pretty annoying.
You almost want to go to the bar and get
Yeah.
a drink to go into the venue first.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to do that. I would say that I got their pina coladas. I would say Jenks at Point Pleasant still makes the best pina coladas I've ever had. But these were good, and yeah, the service is good. Sometimes the bars are a bit crowded, but I didn't feel like it was too difficult to get a drink. There's usually servers coming around on the ship too.
Yeah, I think a couple things on this boat. They have the sugarcane mojito bar. They have a lot of specialty drinks. Throughout the cruise, they try all the drinks. I really like the spicy passion mojito and the jalapeno cucumber mojito. So if you like your drinks with a little bit of spice or heat to them, I would recommend those. I felt, other than that, right, there wasn't a lot of specialty drink areas on the boat. They do have, one thing I like is the drink of the day. So every day they'll have a frozen drink and a non-frozen drink. If you don't have the drink package, those are discounted. So that's just a little, fun fact there. But overall, bars and beverages were good. There's a lot of different bars on the boat, right? Some of them are outdoors on deck 8, which is great. And so, never, with the exception of dinner, right? You don't really find a difficult time to get a drink on the boat. So I give it a 4. All right, so we're coming into our final section of the C review, which is accommodations. This has 4 subcategories. We have ship design and experiences, stateroom, and then
Activities and itinerary.
Okay, so we're gonna start with ship design and experiences. Now this is where we're gonna get into some of the, bad side of this particular cruise for us. Why don't you lead off talking about the design and the layout of the ship, your experience, all that.
Yeah, so I gave it a 2. We've been on this ship before. Unfortunately, things have changed since we've been on this boat. So noticed that once we got started moving, that there was a strong vibration on the boat. I think I even maybe first noticed, I don't know where I first noticed it, but anyways, we noticed it in the room. Then we noticed it when we went to the buffet. We noticed when we went to the complimentary dining. Then I started to notice that it wasn't just like the room, when you go back to it, it was the bed, the toilet seat, everything was vibrating. And so, waiter said to us, once we get off the Mississippi River, things will change. And unfortunately, they did not. Found out, so lying on chaises, they were vibrating. Sitting at certain tables, the comedy venue vibrating, Cagney's vibrating, almost like 80% of what we did.
It was like anything really towards the back.
The
of
back
the
third of the back third of the ship.
Yeah, so, and we've been on, actually, this ship before. So we were on this boat in 2017. The ship was just built in 2014, so it was 3 years old at this point. Now it's 2025. It's 11 years old. I feel like the ship is starting to age a little bit here, even to the point that on our cruise, there was outside at the pool deck while we were sitting there, one of the showers by one of the hot tubs broke and was shooting water out in real time. On deck 8, one of the doors at one day wouldn't close and they had to section it off. And there was a couple other things that were sort of starting to break down during this boat. The vibration thing was a big problem, and we took a little video of like when we were packing the bag, and I'll try to overlay it on top of this, but just vibrating, and so that was a real challenge. There was also some things in the design that I didn't love. So for example, the ropes course, it's a feature on this boat. It wasn't open the entire cruise. They said in the beginning it was for maintenance, and then later because of weather. But I also didn't love the layout of it. It's actually at the back of the boat behind the smokestack. So when you're up there, if you want to go around on the ropes, you're actually going to be breathing in that exhaust. And that is true also for Spice H2O. It's in the back of the boat. You go back there, it's just like, you don't want to sit back there.
It was really bad. It was
really,
horrible.
really bad. So I did not love that about the boat. The water slides were fun. I did all the water slides. Those were fun. I do love the waterfront. That's the outdoor on deck 8 that wraps around the entire boat. I think that's one of the reasons we were looking forward to going back on this boat. We did hang out there a little bit. I think that actually led into some of how Norwegian designed their new class of ships, like the Prima and Viva and Luna. So we're excited about that. But I think overall, I gave this category a 3. I think you gave it a 2. So we're gonna move on to stateroom. So the stateroom, you gave it a 1. I gave it a 2. Talk about the stateroom.
Well, in the end, I gave it a 1 because I really couldn't relax in there. I had to go let them know what was going on. They had someone come check it out, and they just kind of felt the floor vibrating. But their MO is to say it's normal for the ship, and at the same time they'll help you, to accommodate you to feel better. So they gave me an inside solo room, which was not vibrating. You could definitely feel I actually think you could feel more movement and swaying there than on the outside. I don't know why. But there was no vibrating, so that was great. However, I was near some inner workings of the ship, so I thought there were just carts rolling over me all the time, but I was woken up by the actual boat multiple times and had to use AirPods when I was in there, basically the whole time. I did go back to sleeping in the room some of the time. Sometimes the vibrations might change a little bit, or I was just tired from the day. But it was really hard to have all my stuff in one room. We didn't get to spend as much time with each other as we liked. So that was really frustrating, especially because I'm playing, I play the noise game a lot.
Yeah, so Jen has some noise sensitivity, right? And so obviously on this particular boat, it was a point of frustration for her. In terms of the stateroom, I did like the layout of the stateroom. The bed was more towards when you walk in, then you have the couch where you have an open area and a balcony at the back. I've had it where it's reversed and the bed is more towards the balcony, and I didn't like that layout. So I did like this layout on the Getaway. They did have USB ports and USB-C ports on the lights next to our bed on either side, so that was a nice feature. There was a decent amount of storage in the room, and the toilet was set up like I've seen other videos where people have a caddy-cornered toilet or they can't get their knees in, but the toilet was set up in the right way so it was comfortable when you had to use a toilet. What I didn't like about the room was the closet door is broken. And they actually came and fixed it when you complained about the room, and then it sort of broke again. And
It just kept going off track, I think.
yeah, I just ended up shoving like a flip flop in between the doors so they wouldn't vibrate all day. And it was a small balcony. The balcony itself was really small. And then last time we were in the Getaway, we had a bigger balcony. And then the vibration thing was, it was really a problem. And, so overall, I gave the stateroom a 2. And now I just want to let you guys know, we were in the mid of the ship, so we did try to pick a mid cabin, but it was more towards the aft elevators. So if you are picking a room on the Getaway, try to pick mid to mid forward, because I think you were more forward, and that didn't have the vibration issues that we had in the back of the boat. So. All right, next up is activities. So we both gave this a 4. Talk to us about what your experience was.
Yeah, I mean, there was activities I didn't even have time to do some of them. So it was fun. I never really gamble, but I won some money, like, $55 or something like that. I played Deal or No Deal, which was fun. Won like some free digital photos. And for the most part, they definitely have a decent amount of stuff to do, for a few weeks.
Yeah, Norwegian does a really good job, especially on your sea days, packing the day with a bunch of different things that you can do, whether it's trivia. I think we did a virtual escape room, we did a murder mystery, right? And then obviously you have all the entertainment. You do have the onboard experiences like the water slide and the dance parties. There's an 80s dance party, a glow party. There was an ocean fest that we didn't get to go to, which was all reggae music and all the live bands. So there's just a lot of different stuff to do, and Norwegian does that right. So we gave them a 4 in this category.
Then Itinerary,
yep.
We both gave a 3.
We both gave it a 3. So this had it was an 11-day repositioning cruise. It had 5 stops outside of New Orleans and New York. That was Cozumel, Mexico. We then went to Grand Cayman, Aruba. Spoiler, I love Aruba now. We went to Curacao, and we finished at the Dominican Republic before going home. Because it was a repositioning cruise, right, some of the ports were shorter than normal. There was, I think, Grand Cayman and the Dominican were basically like half days. They were like 6-hour days while we were there. The rest were a little bit longer. But talk about your experience there, Jen.
Well, yeah, I would say even with Curacao, we did an activity in the morning, but it was a beach time, but it was only like, it was 3 hours, and it included like 45 minutes to get there and 45 minutes to come back. So kind of felt a little taken advantage there by the setup of it, why we couldn't stay longer, because our boat wasn't leaving for another few hours. So I'm not saying it was anyone's intention to do that, but we wanted to enjoy it longer, and we spent, I'm sure, a decent amount of money on it. So and then the tender boats to get to Cayman Islands. These were like 2 small boats that had to take whoever wanted to go off the boat, and because we didn't have an excursion and we didn't know what was going on, we waited till about 1 o'clock to get off the boat, and it was a short stay already. It was the nicest beach, and we only got 90 minutes there, so that was very, very frustrating, because for me personally, I like the beach part, and I would say that you really have to like the whole cruise experience, because it's not really about the ports as much. You're getting a taste, but maybe just a tourist taste of more about you're hoping for good weather, or something like that, versus really experiencing the island.
Yeah, and again, that's some of it being a repositioning cruise. Most of the closed loop cruises, you spend 8 or 9 hours at the location those particular days. But yeah, I think one of the most frustrating things for me here was the tender ports at Grand Cayman. They just took so long, and I think when we were there was like 2 other cruise ships docked. So, and it doesn't seem like Norwegian had their own tender boats. They were a company that was leased out to doing the tenders, and I think they were splitting the boats between the other cruise lines, and it was like 45 minutes to an hour for the next 2 boats to be called. And I think by the time we actually got off the boat, it was almost 1 o'clock. We had to be back by like 3:30. So we really didn't get a lot of time at that location. It was probably the most amazing beach out of all the locations we were at, but that was a little annoying. And I think it just seemed like there was like a rain cloud that was following us right the entire time, because at each of the locations, like Aruba was a little overcast, you know, it rained at Dominican Republic. So I enjoyed the sea days. I know Jen didn't, but I think that the shortened days at a couple of those locations really, I couldn't give it any higher than a 3 for me. So let's talk about overall scores. So your overall total, Jen, was a 35 out of 50, which was an overall rating of 3.5 out of 5. Mine was a 36 out of 50, which was a 3.6 out of 5. So I think overall, you know, one final thing I'll say is that I did enjoy many aspects of the cruise. It was probably about 1 day too long for me. I think I could have used a 10-day instead of an 11-day. But one of the things we didn't get to talk about in this video necessarily was we made some great connections with people. You know, John and Helene from Canada. We had Antonio and Molly that we met from DC. And there's a few other people that we talked to along the way. We just really enjoyed getting to know people. So that was fun. Would I recommend the Norwegian Getaway to people? I would say yes, with a caveat: book more towards the front of the boat and book a closed loop cruise where you get a little bit more time at each location. All right, so if you liked what you saw and you want to see more, please make sure to hit that subscribe button so you can follow us along on our journey. Give us a big thumbs up and drop us a comment down below. Have you been on the Getaway before? Did you experience the vibrations? These were not good vibrations. And you know, maybe you've done a repositioning cruise as well. What was your experience like? So we'd love to hear all that. And until next time, we want to say stay salty,
Stay adventurous, and happy cruising.
That's better. Love you.
Love you.